Nena Saguil was born in 1914 and completed her fine arts education at the University of the Philippines in 1933, alongside another important female artist of her generation, Anita Magsaysay. In Philippine modern art history, Saguil belonged to a coterie of artists who were exploring a language beyond post-impressionism, moving towards what they called neorealism and then non-objective art. With a scholarship from the 𝘝𝘪𝘠𝘪𝘠 organization in 1954, she studied at the École des Arts Américains at the Palais du Fontainebleau in Paris. She later went to the Académie de la Grande Chaumière, where she was mentored by the surrealist Henri Gutz, originally an American who moved around the circles of Hans Hartung, Raoul Ubach, and Maria Helena de Vieira da Silva. Saguil's first one-person exhibition in Paris was set up by Gallery Cruz in 1957. She also exhibited in the galleries of Suzanne de Conanc beginning in 1965 and in international exhibitions like the Biennale Hispano-Americana de Arte in 1954 in Havana, the Paris Biennale in 1961, and the Salon de l'Art Sacré et de Réalité Spirituelle at the Musée de l'Art Moderne in Paris in 1965, the 7 Salon International Paris Sud in Juvisy in 1966, among others. She died in Paris at the Hôpital Tonon in 1994. The work of Saguil in the 𝘉𝘳𝘪𝘠𝘵 collection presents to us at first glance concentric circles that assume depth because of the variations in delicacy as well as the subtle shifts in the tones of blue and violet of poster paint being absorbed by paper. We notice that the rings descend to another concentric circle, and in fact there are more around in different permutations. Finally, the scene becomes a constellation of vortices or ripples or orbits. In an interview, Saguil likens painting to mathematics and regards her abstraction as landscape. To understand the work in the 𝘉𝘳𝘪𝘠𝘵 collection, we might want to look into the various contexts in which Saguil inhabited in Paris. First is the internationalism being enhanced in the market through the efforts of the Gallery of Cruz and Suzanne de Conanc in which Saguil exhibited. Alongside Saguil, for instance, Cruz gave space to artists from Sri Lanka, Vietnam, Australia, the former Yugoslavia, and so on, and had a progressive agenda, presenting experimental works and artists from various parts of the world. Duconanc, in her own way, took risks in artists who were not French and arranged traveling exhibitions in places like Madrid, Stockholm, and Istanbul, in which Saguil participated. Speaking of the international, Saguil will be visited in Paris by Filipino artists like Jess Aiko and David Medalla. Medalla may have introduced her to the critic and curator Paul Killer, who organized the exhibition titled Sounding Swan at the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford in 1964. Saguil was with Medalla, the Greek Takis, the Belarusian Sarfin, and the Venezuelan Soto, among others. The second entry point is the expanding world of abstraction in the 60s in Paris, in which there was a drift towards a rethinking of the duality between reality and spirituality. Saguil, for instance, took part in an exhibition presented by the Museum of Modern Art in Paris called Salon de l'Art Sacré et de Réalité Spirituelle. Saguil was also mentioned in a survey of global abstraction in 1974. Still part of a turning away from the empiricism of the object and the mystification of abstraction, a third moment might have been sought in the notion of the cybernetic, in which art and science, nature and artifice converge. Suzanne de Conanc opened Centre d'Art Cybernétique in 1962. A Philippine critic, Leonidas Beneza's description of Saguil's work may give us a clue to the connection between a cybernetic consciousness and abstraction. Beneza wrote of Saguil's new cosmos, a universe with its own laws of gravity and gravitation, suggestive of the inner fluxes and motions of the blood and the passage of wind and rain in the valleys and mountains of the unconscious, as well as the outer fluxes with which we are all familiar, stream and river, moon, sun and planet, system and galaxy. When a friend of Saguil, the Philippine artist Gaston Damag, provoked her by asking if she was painting like Sonia Delaunay, the Ukrainian-French artist who co-founded Orphism with her husband Robert, she responded quite sharply in the negative, saying that Delaunay's work is systematic while hers is sensible, which may mean a work sensitive to the senses and responsive to the natural world that is bodily sensed. A German critic thinks that Sagil's points of departure are the micro world of the nuclear cell, the breathing surface of the skin, the growing hair follicle, the color-rich feather crown of the peacock, or the artistic veinwork of wood. Another observer comments that Sagil's calligraphy is a movement with no beginning and no end. Its span is that of a weave of arachne, one eluding measurement. The final entry point is the subjectivity of a migrant artist in the 50s and 60s in Paris who lived alone and cultivated an artistic practice on her own. It might have been that Saguil was liberated by Paris, or that the city and its art world provided her the space to more fully experience and experiment with the world. When a friend asked her if she wanted to return to Manila, she answered that Manila's art scene was male-dominated. In Paris, she was relatively unconstrained by the patriarchal commitments of the homeland and pursued her path as an artist. Sagil's restless imagination found its universe in Paris, according to the art critic Emmanuel Torres, incorporating found objects like shells, coffee grains, tinfoil, other bits of applique for texture, breaking the painting's four-square format by shaping canvas and drawing paper into irregular contours, painting on a canvas in the form of a diamond, tondo, or ovalo, punching a hole or holes into the canvas surface. When asked about style, Sagil responded, "Style? What is it? I wish to make it clear that if I paint, I do in my own way, in the spirit and the sentiment of the present." We take inspiration from the way she summons the words spirit and sentiment and situate them in relation to the term present. On the one hand, the notion of the present speaks to the condition of an immediate, possibly urgent artistic climate. On the other, the imagination of spirit and sentiment inflects such urgency with a vital force, something that is elusive, difficult to colonize or reduce in terms of image or object, and by extension of race or gender or identity in a more migrant atmosphere. Nena Saguil's work is an attempt to at once reveal an interior world of solitude and open up to a vaster, ever incipient sphere that challenges the limits of the rational or empirical mind, just like the precious, unassuming, but cogent painting in the Prita Calao Ledesma collection. In her artistic life, Saguil tirelessly drew and painted the intricacies of an always emergent life world, telling a different rhythm of time in the act of meditation, and patiently gathering the fundamental particles of this formative world and beyond.